Wonderful. Good evening, everybody, and welcome. Hopefully you see the Hollywood squares here in front of you. And yes, there's only one of me. The other picture of me is actually our phenomenal Chrissy, our marketing director, who is actually behind the scenes, making sure things go okay for us. So sorry you have to look at two of me. I'm really sorry, but really it's her and her cute cat in the other picture. We are so pleased to have all of you for our second installment of our UNESCO Week in our virtual events. This Common Ground series this year has been something that is absolutely wonderful. If it is your first time joining us, do know there are many other wonderful Common Ground events we've had this year, and many of them have had descendants in them. But tonight is truly special. And tonight's program and all of our Common Ground programming through this upcoming year is being made possible by two wonderful grants, people that really believe in the work we're doing. One is the Maryland Heritage Area Authority, and one is Maryland Humanities. Maryland Humanities, both, and Maryland Heritage Area Authority have both, this is not the first time they're sponsoring Common Ground. They really believe in this work, and we are so grateful. My name is Nancy Easterling. It is my honor to serve as the executive director of Sotterley. And though Sotterley has many reasons, it is a very special place. Truly one of the most incredible aspects of Sotterley is the fact that we have over 200 self-identified descendants as part of our Descendants Project. And tonight you are hearing from just a few of our incredible descendants, and you're going to be able to meet them, hear their voices, because at the end of the day, their stories are our Sotterley stories, and they are all of our stories. And I know that you are going to enjoy listening to them tonight as much as I am. They are as wonderful as we could possibly hope for. And so with no further ado, I'm going to turn the evening over to Jeanne Pirtle, our Director of Educational Program and Partnerships. I do want to just say one housekeeping thing before Jeannie introduces everybody and lets us get started. If you're used to coming into our other webinar jams, and that's usually the platform that we use for most of our programs, there's just a chat room, and that's where you both chat and you put your questions in. Tonight will be different, however. Please feel free to sign into the chat. We'd love to know where you're joining us from. You can have conversations there, make comments. But if you have a question, if you could instead type it into the Q&A section down at the bottom of your screen. If you don't see it, just move your cursor down to the bottom if you're not as familiar with Zoom. And that's where you'll see both the Q&A and the chat. You're welcome to use both platforms tonight because, of course, we want to hear what you would like to ask of our wonderful panelists. Also, you are in charge of the view tonight. We do have gallery view. That's how you'll be seeing everybody. But if you're not familiar with Zoom, up in the top right corner, you do have the ability to see the speaker only. Our speaker is a primary view if that's easier for you to watch. So you get to be in control of that. Also, if somebody is not speaking, just as Chrissy has it turned off and you have to see me down at the bottom, if you run your cursor over the top right corner, there's some little dots. You can see hide non-video participants. If you click on that, you won't have to have as many squares on your screen. So just a few little housekeeping items. So Jeannie, our Director of Educational Program and Partnership, now has the honor of introducing our speakers for tonight.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Nancy. I'm Jeanne Pirtle, and welcome. I'm glad you all joined us and you choose Sotterley programming. Tonight is special for Sotterley, and it's special for me personally. As many of you already know, that Sotterley has always had some descendants that have been involved in Sotterley and in Sotterley's interpretation over the years, but we formalized our Descendants project, about 4 years ago. And our descendants have been self-identifying, and so it increases our family and increases our participation, and people can learn their heritage and history. So it's a total blessing for me personally and for Sotterley. So tonight we're going to hear from some of our descendants, and we want you to feel like the audience to feel like you're sitting here with us, although that might make some of us feel nervous, but it's going to be a relaxed atmosphere. So we're all family here. So thanks for joining us, joining our family tonight. So I'm going to actually call on the descendants, and they're going to introduce themselves. And I would like for each participant to introduce yourself, where you live, and how you're connected to Sotterley. Okay, Donald, let's start with you.
Hey, well, good evening, everyone. My name is Donald Barber, and I live in Hollywood, Maryland, about 4 or 5 miles from Sotterley. And my connection with Sotterley is I actually grew up on Sotterley, and I lived there the first 16 years of my life, and had a great affinity for the place. I love it, and I'm very happy to still be involved and have the opportunity to be involved with Sotterley. So I worked for over 30 years in the human services field, primarily as a mental health counselor and a social worker. And I retired about 2 years ago, and I've just been loving life since then. So I'm very happy to be here.
Thank you. Angela? I can't hear you. You're muted.
My name is Angela Wilson. I'm from Baltimore County, Maryland, and I connect to Sotterley through my third great grandmother, Charlotte Lyles. And I've been researching for a few years now, and that's what led me to Sotterley.
Jeanne?
Hello, my name is Jeanne Briscoe, and I am a descendant of one of the former owners of Sotterley, the Dr. Walter Hanson Stone Briscoe and Emmeline Dallin Briscoe, who owned and lived at Sotterley for many decades in the 1800s. And I am on the board of directors with Donald and Gwen, other panelists tonight, and serve in that capacity. And of course, volunteer like so many people do at Sotterley. When I'm not working, I work full time also. I live in Hollywood, but I work as an attorney in Lexington Park. So that's a little bit of my background.
Okay, thanks. Liz?
Hi, I'm Liz Cropp, and I'm descended from George Plater III. I'm a Plater, and I live in New Orleans, Louisiana. I'm an architect here. Well, down there, I'm actually in Asheville right now, but that's my connection to Sotterley, and I'm so thrilled that these talks are going on. I think it's wonderful.
Okay, Gina?
Hi, I'm Gina. I am in Philadelphia. I am a retired federal government public relations director. I retired about 2 years ago. And I am connected to Sotterley in a few ways, one through Jeanne Briscoe, but also after emancipation, my ancestors worked at Sotterley.
Gwen?
Hi, I'm Gwen Bankins, native of St. Mary's County. I'm on the board of directors. I'm a Kane descendant. My great-grandfather was born at Sotterley, but he was not a slave. However, his father was. And I've been involved with Sotterley since I was in middle school in the 70s.
Okay. Gwen, we'll start with you on the next section here. When and how were you introduced to Sotterley? How long have you known about Sotterley? When were you introduced to it?
I was introduced to Sotterley in 1977 through Agnes Callum Kane. I was, I believe, in the 7th grade back then. And I did not want to come to Sotterley because I didn't know why I would want to go to a plantation where my ancestors were laborers and what the purpose of that was. But through many years, I've got a different perspective because Sotterley's story changed from the slaves at Sotterley to the enslaved, and we started making them a part of the story.
Gina? Same question. When and how were you introduced to Sotterley?
Okay, so I just learned about Sotterley about 2 years ago, and I only knew about it through the website. I was going to be down there for a family reunion, new people that I had not met before, and I looked it up to see what is there to do down in Southern Maryland, and I saw information about Sotterley and decided to visit. So it has been pretty interesting, and I'm also on the board of directors also. But it's a beautiful place, and it was basically, that's how I learned about Sotterley. And if it wasn't for me learning about my ancestry through DNA, to this day, I would still never know I had a Southern Maryland connection. I would have thought everybody was in Philadelphia, but I learned something totally different.
Thank you. Liz? Same question.
I first learned about Sotterley when I was a child. My grandfather was notorious for telling stories about the ghosts of Sotterley, and some of it very fictional, I've discovered recently. But we did visit Sotterley in the 60s. I'm not sure which year. And it was just intrigued by the whole place. I didn't hear much about the slavery, which, you know, I'm hoping that's changing, and it is because of what we're doing now. So I'm very excited about that.
Jeanne?
So I, like Donald, live very close to Sotterley and grew up near here in Hollywood. So of course, we were always aware of Sotterley. At that, when I was growing up, you know, it was still a private home. So, you know, it wasn't the museum site it is today, open to the public for the most part. So we didn't really go there when I was young, but certainly knew it was part of my family history. Like Liz, you know, the whole plantation slavery part of that was not really talked about at all. So like Liz, you know, it's something that's we've all come to talk about more and more as the years have gone by. But I've gotten involved, you know, here as I say, a volunteer and board member over the last, I'm going to say maybe 15 years, I'm guessing, but, you know, it's been not an honor to do that.
Angela?
Well, I found out about Sotterley, as I said before, while doing research. And I saw in the census that my second and third grandmothers had been at Sotterley. And then I sent an email to Jeanne Pirtle to confirm that. Prior to that, I had never heard of Sotterley. And then before I actually went to take a look around at Sotterley, I went there for a speaker series on Georgetown slavery. And I had planned to take a look around after that series, but there was a thunderstorm coming, so I left. But then I ended up coming back. And learned a great deal. Saw a lot of things, learned a great deal, met a lot of nice people. All of you, eventually, yes.
Donald?
Okay, I learned about Sotterley when my parents brought me home from the hospital because that's where we lived. And my mother and father both worked at Sotterley, and they were very fanatical about historic preservation. That you step lightly and you try to leave the fewest traces of yourself as possible, and everything was geared towards preserving what stood there at the mansion. And to give you an idea how old school they were, they referred to the mansion as the big house. And the farm was still operating back then. Mrs. Ingalls, Mabel Ingalls, was the owner, and she still, even though she had turned it over for people to do tours, she would periodically come down from New York and stay at the mansion for several days at a time. And that was always a very hectic time because, like I said, both my parents worked for her. So sometimes we would go days at a time without seeing them because they would go to work in the morning before we woke up and come home at night after we had gone to sleep. So they were very hardworking folks, and they taught us a lot about a work ethic and the importance of having a job and doing a job well. And the thing that my parents took from their experience at Sotterley was the value of an education. So they insisted that we all go to college. And I think that's one of the things that was beneficial to me from having a contact with Sotterley was my parents' emphasis on education. So there were a lot of, Mrs. Ingalls had friends that would come. There was a whole constellation of people when Sotterley functioned as a private residence that were involved with Sotterley that would come and visit Mrs. Ingalls and stay, at the spinning cottage and some of the other properties around Sotterley. They would stay there, like down at the Wharf House or something. And there were several writers, like the Ritchie family and the Hortons. And these were all great people. They were very friendly and willing to share and their experiences, and they were very tolerant of children. So we were able to kind of hang around with them and experience that. And at that time, they were embarking on some colonial archaeology at Sotterley for a limited space with a local archaeologist named Mike Humphreys. And I was able to be involved in that dig when it took place, and that was very educational too. So Sotterley was just a spot that was just full of information and knowledge, and it was a very stimulating place to grow up. So I'm really grateful that I had the opportunity to grow up on Sotterley and benefit from that.
Thank you. So the next thing, so I want you to take your time on this one. What feelings, positive and negative, can you share with us today about your connection to Sotterley? So as I said before, our audience likes real, and that's what we're looking for. But whatever you feel comfortable sharing, we appreciate your generosity in advance. Okay, so let's start with Angela on that question.
Okay. My feelings, I have mixed feelings about Sotterley. Most days I'm fine with it, but then there's sometimes where I go through feelings of being hurt or a little angry. And that's not all the time, but it comes back off and on out of nowhere. And then, that can last for quite some time. But then at the same time, I can go to Sotterley, I can go inside the corn crib and I'll see the names of ancestors or surnames from my maternal mother's, my maternal grandmother's side, or my maternal grandfather, and even my paternal grandfather. And although the thought of them being enslaved in some cases working at Sotterley post-slavery, it can be painful, but still knowing where they came from also provides some sort of peace. And as I said before, connecting with Sotterley, I've met a lot of people, such as you guys. I've met cousins. I go to Sotterley, I learn a lot of things. I haven't seen everything yet because there's so much to see. I go there, I meet up with cousins, and we'll have prayer and do libations. And I guess you could say for me, Sotterley, I think is educational and also kind of therapeutic. It helps you to work out those feelings of anger.
Thank you, Angela. Janice, let's go with you.
Okay. Well, as I said earlier, when I grew up, of course, knowing, my family used to own Sotterley. My grandfather was actually the last person to be born, at least in the big house. That was pretty much the extent of it. And of course, the bigger, more thorough, honest story of, the fact that my family, of course, ran a large plantation and had a large number of enslaved. That was a very slow process of learning about it and accepting it and reckoning with it and being able to even talk about it. It was not easy in the beginning, and it still isn't either. But it gets easier with time, at least for me, to talk about it, especially when I meet other descendants like everyone on this panel who, I think I am proud to be a part of this whole descendants group at Sotterley of all different backgrounds, because I think we're an example to the world of how we can talk about these difficult subjects, regardless of, where you came from, in a way that is honest, but also respectful, and trying to learn from it and share our learning and our shared stories with others.
Gina?
Yes, I agree with everything that everyone has mentioned. And I'm connected to Jeanne through her other branch, which is connected to the Cremona plantation, but it's all one and the same. But I wanted to give a shout out to Jeanne, because when I learned there was some kind of connection, I am very good at finding anything online, and I was able to hunt her down. And I sent her an email and I said, I think your people own my people at one time. And she was very gracious and said, you know what? I don't know the history that far back, but I'm copying my husband who also knows. And of course, we found out it was. And so we consider each other cousins. I've, talked to her. I've been at their house. I've slept at their house. And it really is important, as Jan said, with the things going on today, it's good for people to see that folks can just continue to move on. But of course, yeah, I'm not thrilled about all the things that happened to my ancestors and others that had Black skin. It was, very painful. But the main thing is you have to move on while still remembering, so that this does not happen again. So if it means that we have to keep mentioning as descendants all the history, and to be able to say, how many people do you know where you have slave owners, descendants, and descendants of the enslaved are friends? So that doesn't happen too much. And I've talked to many people about it, white and Black and Latino and Asian, and many of my different friends, and all are extremely and surprised about it. So that's a wonderful thing that Sotterley does that really helps. But I am also proud that my ancestors, when they lived here, or lived at Sotterley, they were getting paid a good amount of money, which I can't even remember what it said in the census, but I know that they at that time had maybe $150, like in 1870 or something. So, you know, it's a long history. It's there, and I think it's also really good that right in Maryland there are the plantations. I'm in Philly, born and raised all my life, so for me to hear about a plantation kind of close is kind of interesting, and most people I don't think even think of it. Most Northerners, when we think of plantation, we kind of think of Virginia down and not so much of Maryland. So it's just a good thing for people to know about.
Liz?
I just want to say I really appreciate listening to everyone's opinions and stories here. From my perspective, the positive side was hearing the stories from my family and being able to experience Sotterley at a young age and later in my life, the preservation of all the buildings and the whole site, in fact. And of course, the negative part to me, which came later in life, and I have to admit that, is the learning of the slavery. We were not taught about that. It was not spoken about before. And I really am very happy that it has become the topic of conversation and is included in the history of the site.
Gwen?
I think for me, becoming aware that Sotterley existed as a child, I had anger because it's not something that I really wanted to share and didn't understand why anybody wanted to know more about it. But that was because of the way that slavery was presented to us in school. That was the only story that was told. And then once you become aware of something, you have to become educated. Every place is not the same. Not to say that conditions weren't harsh. Slavery is not a pretty topic to talk about. But for me, I felt like when Agnes saw the lock on the door and the chain and it said, "Do not enter," I kind of feel like that's the way it kind of has been for people who look like me through history. You didn't have a voice. What you did wasn't important until somebody felt it was important enough to hear you. So as I started becoming more educated and learning different perceptions about the contributions of people who look like me, I started having a different appreciation. And as I started sitting in on the oral histories, I started learning that when you have a story, you can invest in it regardless of whether it's a positive or a negative experience, and you have a takeaway from it. And learning that even though at a time when you were oppressed, you could still contribute something to a community and you could build, and you could still, even though you were enslaved, not by your own choice, you had something to bring to the table and you still were able to raise a family. And like today, I have it's a spirit of healing with Sotterley, because with the way society has become, when I sit at Sotterley, there's a strength that I get from my ancestors, knowing what they endured. The anger is less. The appreciation of having someone that felt that it was important to tell the story, I can appreciate, and it also helps to heal some of the things that we go through and experience today.
Thank you. Donald?
Okay. One of the advantages I had of actually growing up on Sotterley was I got to walk past the slave cabin every day on my way to school. So my mother and father always used it as an example of what can happen to you if you don't take advantage of the opportunities that life presents to you. Because they say, you know, the people that lived in that house would have given anything to have the opportunity that you have. And then if you just squander it, that's really an insult to them. So that was a very a very tangible lesson that they taught in life, and that and also it's really a kind of symbolic of the journey of African Americans in this country, that we came from such just a harsh introduction and came so far. So it was a lesson I never forgot. So but the other thing about my mother is she was just a very matter-of-fact person, because she learned that you could because my parents were basically laborers at Sotterley, so they weren't making a lot of money. So the plan was to go to college, and my mother said, well, in order to go to college, you're gonna have to pay for it, and the best way to pay for it is to win a scholarship. So I won a scholarship like it was a plan. I was a National Merit Scholar, and I won a scholarship. So that's how I was able to go to college. It was like, she just said a matter of fact, that's how you go to college. You have to win a scholarship. But it was far from a given. I mean, it took a lot of work and a lot of studying to get there. So like I said, there's a lot of lessons to be learned at Sotterley. And even to this day, I mean, it's just an ongoing thing. And that's why it's such a valuable resource to our community. That if you're serene enough to listen and observe and absorb, you can learn a lot from Sotterley.
Good. So, and this might, I'm just having you elaborate a little bit more, but share with us how your relationship with Sotterley and its history affects and has affected you. How did it change your life, and how is it still affecting it?
Okay, one of the great things about being around Sotterley were just the number of people that you come in contact that are well educated and goal oriented, and actually that have a degree of success in their fields. And most of those people, I'm not saying most, I'm saying all of them, were just very kind-hearted kind of people. And like I said, they were willing to share their experiences and the benefit of their experiences with you. Just some really kind people were affiliated with Sotterley. Now, the people in the local Hollywood neighborhood, they had a tendency to misinterpret things, because they used to say, like, you went to college, and my sister went to college, and I had a brother that went to college, and they say, like, well, Ms. Ingalls paid for them to go to college. Well, no, she didn't. So I do believe that Mrs. Ingalls was responsible for me going to college, because my mother would say, if you don't go to school and do your work, then you can work for Mrs. Ingalls. Well, you get up, you do your homework, and you go to school every day. So, because that was always in the background, because, the kind of work was cutting grass and cutting hay and things like baling hay and things like that. They were terrible jobs. So I was more than happy to go to school when the fall came, because we did those jobs in the summertime. But the constellation of people that were around Sotterley were like writers and artists and things. And like I said, it was just nice having contact with those kind of individuals, because the local St. Mary's County people were tendency to be farmers and kind of blue collar people, and they weren't at all racially aware and progressive. For the most part, they were very regressive. I started in a segregated school system. First 2 years I went to school, I went to Banneker, and rode past several white schools in the school bus on the way to Banneker. So, in the mid to late 60s, when they integrated the public school system, it was just a nice experience to be able to go to the local school and ride the school bus for less than an hour. So that was nice. And like I said, the people that we met that were affiliated with Sotterley were the more open-minded kind of intellectual folks. So it was just a great opportunity to come in contact with people like that.
Thank you. Angela, so that question, how your relationship with Sotterley and its history affected you and has affected you.
Well,
Present tense.
coming to Sotterley and learning so much, because there's so much to learn, has made me want to learn even more about slavery. You know, it's made me want to learn more about their way of living as well as being enslaved, you know, what they did when they were enslaved, what did they use, you know, what kind of materials did they use? And for that reason, I participated in an archaeology dig, and I'm going to participate in a couple more, and continue to learn everything about, as much as I can, about slavery. You know, it's not enough to sit around at the dining room table and have people telling stories about something they've seen on TV or read in a book. Somebody needs to go out there and actually learn things and make sure stories get told properly. And I feel like I'm supposed to at least participate in that to some degree.
Gina?
I would just say, for me, the biggest thing is just knowing that I'm a descendant of folks who were there, and who were able to kind of start to save and to start to move to another level, because of Sotterley. So I have a history kind of in a way that has to do with slavery, but I also have a history of some of the ancestors who came from somewhere else and then worked there after emancipation. So for me, it's just knowing the history. My mom was a history teacher here in Philly, a high school history teacher. So for me, history was always extremely important in our family, and especially Black history, because it was never taught, you know, as widely as history of, you know, the United States or white history, etc., European history. But I would just say the main thing is just know that my ancestors had some kind of connection to Sotterley, means that no matter what, no matter where I go, no matter how old I get, all of us will always have some kind of connection to Sotterley.
Thank you. Liz?
I am aware of the advantages that I had being a descendant of a white family in Maryland and Louisiana. And I feel like, you know, I'm just very thrilled to hear all the other stories and to learn about the slavery part of it, and understand that, you know, it was a very different perspective on my part. And it's ultimately obvious listening to everyone's stories here, how different that is. So.
Jan?
I feel the same way as Liz. You know, it's been enriching and rewarding for me personally to learn not just about my family, you know, the good and the bad, but everyone else's stories. And I just, you know, I find it so exciting to be doing these type of programs and reaching out to people from all over the country that have, you know, links to Sotterley. It's pretty amazing. And, you know, to feel comfortable to have discussions like this, it has been for me a very, you know, sometimes difficult, but very rewarding development in my life.
Gwen?
Twofold. First, I'm in awe of Sotterley. and the commitment and the passion that people have to be transparent and telling the story. The people that I've met have been nothing short of fascinating. Their passion just to continue to find out more, whether it's about an African grave site, whether it's about um, who is connected to who, whether it's just telling the story a little bit more in depth. For me, it's I've always loved history and I've always loved Maryland history, but knowing that I'm connected to a place that I can trace part of my family back to the 18th century, it's 18th, 19th century. It's a great feeling. Um, I can't learn enough. Seeing a little kid getting excited about an oral history about my family, it makes you wonder, why are you not excited? You know, and I think one of the events that I loved most was after the slave dwelling project, we had the bonfire, and they were sharing stories, and they were talking about looking at the graves for the colored troops. And sometimes I wonder why more people that look like me aren't trying to find out their history, but sometimes I feel like they may not think that there's something there to find out. So having Sotterley continue the conversation has made me be open to others in the community. Sometimes I get, why are you connected with a plantation? Why are you going to that place? So there's more negative energy. And when I share some of the things that I've learned, they're like in awe. They're like, you learned that there? You know, so to keep the conversation going, I'm proud to be associated with Sotterley. I'm thankful that I'm continuing to learn. And yes, also being able to participate in an archaeological dig was incredible. You know, it's like I keep my boots down in the back of my truck because it's like to see other people get excited about how someone lived so many years ago. It's like, and they get excited for each little find, whether it's what was in their diet or what type of uh, uh, dishes they were eating off of, whether it was from Europe or whether it was Native American. It's like, it's just incredible because I wouldn't have learned that if I didn't take the opportunity to get connected to Sotterley and volunteer to learn more. So I'm grateful, I'm humbled, and I'm honored to be associated with it to learn more about my family and to share their history with others.
Thank you. So the next couple of questions. What is your vision for Sotterley's future? And how can this be accomplished, do you think? So let's start with Gwen, you want to continue with that?
By Sotterley continuing to share the story transparently, and I believe letting people know that regardless of what your ancestor status was at any point in history, someone always has something to contribute. It gives them the opportunity to say, hey, there's something that I can do. When I look at the alcoves in the yellow room at Sotterley, I'm in awe of the woodwork that was done there, and to think that it was done by hand and not with a machine, and just looking at how things happened so long ago, an appreciation for history, to move forward, to learn that even though we're different, we things. Just continuing the conversation and sharing, and I feel that it can make a difference racially if we continue to share. We have a shared history. I can't separate my history from Jan's history. Her family owned my family. She is family. You know, I was working with Jan and her dad in the community, not even knowing that in the past her family owned my family. And so it's like, keep the conversation going, gather an understanding, and learn from history and move forward to have some harmony and peace.
Liz?
I very much agree with Gwen, and I'm appreciative of hearing all this. I hope that Sotterley continues to tell the story and to educate people and invite the community in and others to learn more about the total history of the place. That's about it, I guess.
Okay. Angela?
Well, yeah, I agree with Gwen and Liz. And, I'd like for Sotterley to continue to be around for many decades, many generations to come. Because, just like I came there, someone else will be coming too. And I would love for Sotterley to still exist and for them to be able to do research at Sotterley. I would also hope that Sotterley continues to collect oral histories and stories and photographs, and maybe at some point have a larger facility than the corn crib so that people can easily see all of those things. And yeah. And how are you going to do it? With donations? Grants and donations.
Jeanne?
But, you hit the nail on the head, didn't you? There's no question. There's so much at Sotterley. You have almost 100 acres of land and over 20 very historic, authentic structures. And the cost to protect and maintain them is enormous. And it really is miraculous that it is still there,
Right.
and open to the public. So you are right, Angela. My biggest, hope and prayer is that it can continue, and with support of many generous people and grants, like you say, and others, it's happened, but it is always a concern for sure. So we're always looking for that fairy godmother or godfather out there.
They will come.
Donald?
I like that attitude.
Okay. I've always been very thankful to Sotterley for the intellectual stimulation I received there. So I'm very happy that Sotterley has taken the approach of partnering with the various school systems to get the kids out here. And I think they all benefit from it. And I think that's my greatest hope for the future of Sotterley, is it continues to be a resource for children, and continue to focus on enriching children's experience and having them come. Because it's not just the colonial history, but also the environment that the kids are able to walk around and enjoy the trails and everything. I think it's very enriching for them. It's very great to see, and I think it's a great harbinger for the future of Sotterley.
Okay, did everybody get your squares keep moving around? So
Yes.
Gina?
Yeah, I'd like to answer. So I would like to see Sotterley continue to do the work that it's doing as it relates to race reconciliation. We have so much is going on with prejudice, racial issues, white supremacy, everything. And it is almost like me growing up in the 60s, it seems like things have not really changed as it relates to how people feel about people who are different than them, which is very sad. I always believe it's because of not having so much exposure to others, because the more exposure you have to different people who are different races and ethnicities, that's the way that you can bring healing. So I would hope that Sotterley would continue to do these kinds of things to bring people together. And the things that the kinds of events that are there help to do that. And it's, I mean, it's amazing. How many places in Maryland or even on the East Coast or, you know, so close to Philly and New York, where you've got slave cabin and people are doing work and events that help to bring people together. And the more you talk, the better it gets. And things will not get any better if people don't talk. So yeah, there were white folks at Sotterley. Yeah, they enslaved many people. Yeah, it was not pleasant. And so what do we do about it? How do we move forward to make sure that we can make this world a better place for ourselves and the next generation? What can we do? So yeah, it's not always pretty to hear about a plantation, especially I've done a lot of research on how it was to be a slave. I have books about my family. I have words of my ancestors, what they were thinking, what they were saying when they were slaves. So it really is humbling to know that there is a place like Sotterley that at least does not try to hide the facts, you know, of everything. So I would say that Sotterley just needs to continue what it's doing so that we can raise awareness about, even though things are going crazy and the world is going crazy, that there are still people who are trying to make things better and to improve race relationships and understanding.
Thank you. Okay, one one word that explains Sotterley. If you have one, please share. Gwen?
Transparent.
Donald?
Continuity.
Angela?
Me, beginning. The beginning of African-American life in what is now America for some of us.
Jeanne?
Say authentic.
Gina?
Moving.
Liz?
Inclusive, including the stories of the enslaved.
Yeah.
Gwen?
Already, transparent was my word.
Transparent. Okay. Okay. I get everybody. I'm afraid I'm going to miss people. That's why I keep going. Okay. All right. Thank you. All right. If you had, and I want to say that it's already 7:53, so you all are doing a great job. I just want to say thank you again. I want to remind you, if you have a question, the audience I'm talking to, put it in the Q&A section. Yes, Trudy, I'll go look yours up on the chat. I saw your little message pop up, so I won't forget your question. Love you, Trudy. And if you are interested in this kind of programming, please, we've got a whole lineup. We've got a lot of things coming in September, October, and even November. So make sure you register for these programs. Go back and see them later, but we want to hear from you. And also, because we are funded by Maryland Humanities, they like us to do our data collection, and you will see a pop-up survey after the Zoom, and please help us out and fill it out. It helps with our grant reporting, and it also is good to know how we're affecting people. Are we on the right track? What, you know, we like that data also. So I want to remind you about that. And thank you in advance for filling it out. Okay. All right. If you had, this is for the panelists. So if you had one piece of advice to give future generations, what would it be? Liz.
I just want to say Donald struck a note with me when he mentioned the children, and I think educating the children is just key to awareness, community, everything. I'm aware of a plantation in New Orleans, well, not in New Orleans, but in Louisiana, and there's kind of a rift between the younger generation and the older generation about how to address the whole slavery thing. And I know there's a plantation, Whitney, that is educating people, but the younger generation really wants to put it out there and address it. And it's just, I think it's very important. We'll start with educating those children. And thank you, Donald, for that. Appreciate it.
Hey, you're very welcome.
Donald, go right ahead.
Okay.
Have a stab at this.
Gosh, we've said so much. Like I said, I just appreciate the opportunity to be involved in the continued story of Sotterley as it evolves, and the inclusiveness, and the if you think back, you know, the time I lived at Sotterley, they had like a big man focus. So they said Sotterley was owned by this person, then it was owned by this person, and that was all the story they told at that time. So it was just a complete focus on the owners without the community. And I think the involvement of the community is the biggest advance in Sotterley storytelling, and I think it's raised the value of Sotterley in the eyes of the community 1,000-fold by doing that. And I think that's the right tack to take, and I hope it continues to evolve in the future and to involve more individuals and get a wider swath of the community at large. And I think that'll be the value of Sotterley in the future.
And what is a piece of advice that you would give future generations?
The piece of advice I give people is to value your ancestors, you know, to research your history of your own family and to value it.
Okay. Who wants to go next?
I'll go. To piggyback off of Donald, I think that if more younger people did their own research on their families, they would find that they have good things and bad things. We all have good things, but we also have we all have bad things, but we also have an awful lot of good things. You know, slaves helped build America. There's a lot there in your history to be proud of. You need to get to know it. And in addition, I would tell them to journal, because at that point in life, you are making history as well in some form or fashion, and someone, even if it's just your own children, will be interested in your story. I'm done.
Well, Jeanne?
Hard to follow these people, these articulate people, but I would just say, you know, as someone in my shoes, you know, encourage people to, you know, don't be afraid to get out of your comfort zone, you know. Most people are very kind and aren't going to bite and aren't going to blame you for things that happened 100 years ago. But, you know, just be honest and be willing to listen and try to empathize with others and where they're coming from, and get involved. That's what I would say too, is, you know, try to get involved and volunteer. And it's such a great way to learn and meet great people. So that's it for me.
Okay, who's next?
I'll go.
Okay, Gwen.
For me, I would say to not be afraid to follow the story wherever the story takes you. Don't be afraid to go there. There's always somebody that will listen and guide you. Knowing my story at Sotterley helps me to start looking at my dad's family, and I'm thankful for that. And sometimes we run across things that we were never aware of. So, continue to keep an open mind and an open heart. Listen, don't be afraid to do the work to find out who your family is.
Who's not gone on that question yet?
I would say the same thing to young people and also to older people. If all of your friends look like you with the same color, you need to start looking for additional friends. So I would 100% emphasize that the importance of, so that there's, to help with openness, to help people to better understand. I'm really very fortunate. I'm here in Philly. I grew up in the neighborhood, still in the same neighborhood, the school and everything, Black, Jewish, and Italian. And we couldn't get away from each other even if we wanted to. So we Black kids and Italian kids learned everything about the Holocaust. We had a teacher who actually had, who was a Holocaust survivor, who was supposed to be teaching us French, but we learned everything. We learned Hebrew, everything else. And the same thing with our Italian friends. So because of being exposed and living in this kind of area, it kind of helped me to be more open. So I really think if more people had more friends of different races, religions, ethnicities, then when something like this happens, they can at least go to that person and talk. For example, when we still have all of the racial injustice and things going on. I was very happy to have many of my white friends come to me and say, you know what, I was thinking about some of these things and can you tell me more about it? So if you don't have any friends, or if it was even the opposite, if things were happening to white people and a Black person doesn't have one white friend to ask. So since we all know the census has made it very clear that this country is becoming way more diverse, and it's going to be there. And this next generation is going to be way more diverse than ours ever was. So young people need to look and see, take a census of their own friends and look around and say, do I have everybody that represents? Do I have some guys and girls and, all kinds? But that is the only way that we can move forward. I think that's the issue we've had for so long. Everyone has stayed in their own little area and have not been exposed to others of different views and everything else. And that's why we have a lot of the problems we have today.
Okay. Did anyone else have anything to add to that question? All right. Final thoughts, anyone, before we get to the Q&A? Anything anybody wants to say? Okay.
No?
Well, let's get started. Now, I noticed some of the questions coming up. Some of them are quite involved. If you don't get the answer that you need, or you need to know more, please feel free to email me at education@sotterley.org. And if I don't know the answer, I will find someone who can better answer your questions. So just so you know, so we'll try to get to them all. All right. Okay, lots of friends up here. Okay. So, oh, there's Trudy. Okay, good. Okay, looking for questions. Mary Ellen asked, are your children involved with Sotterley?
Well, I don't have children, so.
I'll speak up just because my children who grew up here in Hollywood also, and, you know, got sick of us talking about it, but they now live all over the country, one in California, DC, etc. So they're aware of it only because I ask them every birthday, don't give me any more gifts, give to Sotterley. So they know the routine now. They know it's very important to preserve the place, and, you know, it's part of their history. So that's how I've gotten my kids involved.
Okay, and that goes for nieces and nephews too, people that
Yep.
don't have your own children. You know, family members who are children. I get that would apply to them also. So if you want to answer that question.
Well, I do have family members who would like to come out there, but you know, we're in a pandemic,
Right.
so,
And so you have to do things virtual sometimes.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That is a challenge for all of us.
Yes.
Yeah.
Anyone else would like to?
One of the questions, Jeannie, that you had on your list was about how does your family, what questions do they ask? What do your friends ask? And so
Mhm.
I reached out to my son's girlfriend to answer that question, and she did respond, and she just said, what is Sotterley? What's your relationship to Sotterley? How did Sotterley begin telling the story of the enslaved? And I thought that was a very thoughtful thing for her to ask. I didn't prompt her to any of this, but my kids have heard me talk about Sotterley and they're very aware of it. They're not involved to speak of, but hopefully one day they will be.
I have had my great niece on site for the UNESCO ceremony of remembrance, and some of the kids that I've mentored in the community. I don't have any birth children of my own, but I'll take anybody else's kid and relatives. I'm trying to get that next generation and bring them there, or have them to at least participate or start watching, just to get connected, just to learn their history. So we just have to keep them connected.
Anyone else along that line? Want to add anything? Donald?
Oh, I have
Okay.
brought a few cousins
So,
there.
go ahead.
I was just saying I had brought a few cousins there. I had forgotten about them, but yeah. And they felt the same way about it as I did. You know, they had off and on feelings, but, you know, but overall, they found peace.
So Cynthia asked, have any of you been able to trace your history before coming to or being brought to Sotterley? So your family's history before or being brought. I guess they're looking for some details. Anyone want to share?
Not on the, not on the
Okay.
Sotterley side, but on my father's side. My cousin Jerome is on the line, and he's actually traced our fifth great grandfather back to West Africa, who was actually free. So, and that was by a specific DNA test from the males, which was 7 generations back. So the DNA really will help to connect you. So as far as for Sotterley, no, but on my other side, yes. Thanks, Jerome.
Anyone else?
I have not traced anyone back to Africa, even though I do notice that I have quite a few African DNA matches. So, well, people with African names that match me in DNA, but I haven't researched those yet.
Jerome says, you're welcome, cuz. Anyone else have anything to add to that? Okay, the next question is from Trudy. And And I'll try to add if I need to, but did all Sotterley slaves live and work on Sotterley, or did their labor get sold to Sotterley as day labor? How often did that occur? Anybody have any research that they've done or their personal ancestry? Anything about that? I do know that in the records that they often, Dr. Briscoe did that. He actually housed enslaved people and helped other farmers rent them out. He also had, that was very commonplace. We know that Hillary Kane, the patriarch of the Kane family, who actually, when the land got split up, he was actually held by the neighbor, a relative of the Briscoes, Chapman Billingsley, and his family was at Sotterley. And he was a plasterer, and he would be lent out or rented out for his labor. So that was very common practice. So yeah, sometimes we forget that this is all about money, right? The slavery thing. It's an economic system, and that's why when we do research, we have to follow the money. We have to follow the land records and the sales and the wills and all of those records, because that helps us piece together stories of people's lives. So that was a common practice. I know that from the record. Does that help, Trudy? And I can talk to you more about that too. If you can always email me and ask. And I could probably show you the actual record I got that from. Okay. Another guest named Angela says, Miss Wilson kind of addressed my questions, but are there additional archaeological studies near the slave cabin, or where the other slave cabins stood, and are any new projects being planned? That's a yes. Did anybody else want to chime in? Otherwise, this is kind of a real general question, not specific. Yes, there have been archaeological studies, and always we're learning more. More needs to be done. I'm glad you asked that, Angela, because if you tune in early October, Julia King, who is a renowned archaeologist that has just finished a survey, an archaeological survey of Sotterley, is going to be the speaker for Common Ground. So make sure if you're interested in this subject, please tune in. And there's ongoing research. There has been most of our artifacts that are collected are housed at the at Jefferson Patterson Park at the State Archaeological Center there, and so that survey is really neat because we do know that there were Native peoples at Sotterley for thousands of years before European contact, and we have that evidence on the Sotterley property as we have it now. Remember, Sotterley used to be a lot bigger than it is now today, 94 acres. So when you sometimes we're just a remnant of what is left of that large plantation farm. And so some things probably are lost forever, but we do our best to preserve the land that we have control over, or we have custody of, and at this space and time. So that's ongoing. There's ongoing research about a probable slave African-American grave site, and that's ongoing. and yes, we have some of the artifacts collected from one of the studies around the slave cabin actually on display in our visitor center. So you can come see that. So does anybody have anything they want to add? Maybe we need to talk about the importance of that part of our because it helps us reveals past lives. And yes, about slave cabins, there were many slave dwellings over the centuries at Sotterley. One of the things on the survey that you will find out about in October is we have remnants of slave dwellings from the 1812 time period. There's so that was a major thing. So please tune in October and you can get the full expert story. Okay. All right. education@sotterley.org. Angela, you can email me. Okay. From Alma, our friend Alma Jordan. Gina mentions that her ancestors earned quite a bit of money in the 1800s. Were they not enslaved and not paid? That's a good question.
Okay, thanks. One thing to make it very clear, when we say descendants, we're talking about everybody who had some touching of Sotterley, a white indentured person, a regular worker, an enslaved, an owner, people who worked there after emancipation. So in the 1870 census, there are members of my family or my ancestors who are living right next to Hillary Kane and others. And they say in the 1870 census that their value or property value was about 150 American dollars, of course, back then. So that would be, I don't know what that would be in today's, maybe 5,000 or something. But there's not a lot of the people also on that page that have that amount of money at that time. So as Jeannie said, sometimes they would be rented out or do whatever, but the person was very good at saving money, and he definitely indicates $150 is what he has, meaning of property value and money. So he was working somewhere and saving that money. And again, it's after slavery. So all of us who are descendants are all descendants for different reasons. Donald, as he said, his family actually worked there. They were employees. There were some descendants of slave owners, descendants of enslaved, descendants of people who were Black and who were emancipated after slavery, but worked there. And then all the other things. So just wanted to mention that. I hope I answered your question.
Thank you. I think that sums it up. Yes, not all descendants came from the time of enslavement, and so one of the unique things about Sotterley's Descendants Project is it's really inclusive of everyone, and not every place is so blessed to have that kind of dynamic. And I think it adds a richness that other places may not have. That's my personal opinion. And also Angela asked, I'm also curious if any of the Sotterley descendants have connected to the Georgetown 272 descendants, either through family research or through DNA.
Yes, through my cousin Dante, who is actually related to me on my mother's and father's side. It's tied to Sotterley, and he also kind of leads the area here in Maryland on the Georgetown 272. So that was actually the archaeological dig I was at over at the Newtown Neck Manor So I'm learning that side of the family. So, between Jerome and Dante, prayerfully I learn more. Yes, that is Dante Eubanks.
And I would say the same thing. Dante's my cousin too, and through DNA. And so we're not sure how we're related, but he says it's through that. And so I believe him because he's excellent with his research.
Dante is everybody's cousin.
Well, I have, I make up my own language at Sotterley a lot of times, and I say kind of jokingly, you think you're not related to anybody at Sotterley, don't be so sure, because it has a wide reach, and I always say 6 degrees of Sotterley, and it's so true, because I think of that too, that shows how connected we all truly are. That we have all these, ties to so many different people all over the United States and beyond.
That's why
Right.
I say for people to really do their DNA, there is no way, and I think about my parents who were gone and all these relatives who never knew of this whole connection. It was on, and I'm getting up there, and I just found out 2 years ago that, I have all these connections. I kept wondering why I have all these matches from this area, and now I know. But if I had not done my DNA test, I would still never know there was any connection down here at all.
And somebody, did anybody have anything to add to that? I'm looking through the chat now to see if I missed anything. Does Sotterley offer assistance? I am not a paid genealogist, so it's not like I don't really get paid for the genealogy that I do. I do have on my Ancestry account public trees that I work on to help people find maybe there's a like or a connection. But to, I don't do, that's what I do. And I do that for free if for Sotterley Descendants, or if you think you are. But if you're looking for a report on your family, this is definitive. I'm not your person for that right now. You would need to hire someone to do that. But I can get you on the right track. And I've helped a lot of people. And the names, I know the names really well. So if somebody says a last name, I'm usually, you're from who? What's your last name? Because I recognize it. I've looked at it before. So, I can, and two, our Descendants Project, we don't require you to have absolute proof right now or DNA evidence. We don't require that. If you believe that you are connected and get a descendants form and look, then fill out a form. You're going to learn something. And that way you'll be connected to all the activities we have and things we have to offer for descendants, and you'll get news. But we don't require, it's not like the Mayflower Society or anything like that. Okay, we don't require you to prove it, because the research is ongoing. So we learn from you. If you say that you think that your ancestor is tied, that's going to help us find more of our descendants. So it's a win-win situation. Just thanks for asking, though. That is really important. And if you want me to give you some clues and think if it sounds familiar, I'll tell you if I can't help you or if I can kind of lead you in the right direction. if you email me, okay? All right. And looking for any more questions. I think we're about finished with the questions. Rented. Yeah, I think that Trudy had some more questions, but I think we've already answered those. I think we pretty much exhausted that. So thank you. I wanted to remind you to please fill out that survey for us. And I wanted to thank Gina, Liz, Donald, Angela, Jan, Gwen for doing this. It's a wonderful donation of your time and your hearts and your history, and I really appreciate it. And you know, we're going to do something like this again. We're slated to be on the Slave Dwelling Project Conference. So our slot falls on September 30th. So look that up, register for that conference, and you can visit us again. Okay, Nancy?
You know, I don't know if you guys realized how inspiring you are, if you've been following the chat at all. You know, not only on this panel today do we actually have 4 members of the Board of Trustees, but make no mistake, everyone on this panel is part of Sotterley's leadership right now in so many ways, every single person. And a lot of the people in that audience tonight are also our descendants and also part of this story. We were talking about, you know, when Jeannie said, you know, are you connected to Sotterley? Don't be too sure. One of the things that you all demonstrate with what you are saying to us is we are connected. We are connected. Your stories are our stories, and we need to hear them. We need to hear them and understand them. And part of what this Descendants Project and part of what all of you are involved in is allowing us to listen to a voice other than our own. And not everyone was as blessed as Gina to grow up in a very diverse environment. You know, Gina, I'm so jealous. That was not my existence growing up. I would have loved to do that. But I agree, Gina, step out of your comfort zone. You know, sometimes at Sotterley, you might find you're in a situation where you're learning something about yourself that makes you uncomfortable. But we're going to try to make you as comfortable being uncomfortable as we can, because we want you at the table. This is a conversation we all need to have, understanding our shared history. I am so grateful to each and every one of you. I cannot wait to watch you again on the Slave Dwelling Conference. You're going to blow them out of the water. I am so proud of you all for being chosen to be part of that conference. It's going to be something that so many people need to hear. And your leadership and the leadership of all of our Descendants community is what is taking Sotterley to the next step and into the future. So to all of our attendees tonight, thank you for joining us. Do remember not only, of course, to fill out your form tonight with the survey, but Monday is actually the UNESCO Day of Remembrance for slavery and its abolition. And we are going to have a Facebook Live presentation, but if you are in the area, please come and join us. It will not be the big production that we were able to have pre-COVID. We are hoping to do another one of those next year, but we will absolutely have a very moving and meaningful day at Sotterley. And if you can't join us in person, you can join us via Facebook Live. It is a day for us to remember those who came before and that their history is our history. So to all of you, thank you so much. Thank you to my panelists, Jeannie's panelists, our panelists. You were magnificent. Thank you all. Good night, everybody.
Thank
Good
you,
night.
everybody.
Good night.
Good
Thanks for
night.
joining us, everybody.
You.